Hey everyone! Welcome to episode 4 of Xaybeast Live. I apologize for the lackluster background, but as you probably know, I am about to move to another location. So a lot of the stuff is packed up, including all posters and everything. That's also why the lighting isn't as good, because I do not have my professional studio lights out right now. They are also packed. So this is all you're getting today, but if you read the title of this video, we do have topics to discuss today. I'm going to let a couple more people join, but I'm just going to go over the topics. The title of this video was Classic and Modern Horror, and that's because, okay, well, first, usually these episodes are 2 hours long, and I said that I would do them every Saturday. I've changed those regulations a lot. Now it is going to be 1 hour long, and just weekly. Like, not specifically every Saturday, but just every week at some point, I'm going to release an episode or go live with Xaybeast Live every week. It doesn't necessarily have to be Saturday. No specific time. I will send out reminders or notifications on Instagram and Twitter and YouTube the day that I'm going to go live, maybe the day before, just so that everyone gets a chance to see it. But yeah, welcome to episode 4 of Xaybeast Live, and basically, I have notes here. See, you should be happy about this. I actually have an order to this episode this time. I'm not just going to be rambling. Like episode 3, that was kind of a disaster. All right, especially at the end when the audio cut out and you just couldn't hear what I was saying, and I had to show you what I was typing on my like what I was saying. I had to type it on my phone and just show it to the camera. All right, so you read the title. This is about classic and modern horror. Now, I have divided this into 3 sections actually. Section 1, we're going to be talking about the most well-known horror movies from each decade, starting with the 1920s, and we're going to go all the way to the 2010s. So like the past, like all the way to present day is what I'm saying, basically. Section 2, we're going to talk about what makes a movie scary and how scares used to be versus how they are now. And then Section 3 is the section that people probably enjoy the most, and that is going to be Q&A, updates, and your guys' preferences for the next stream, what you guys want the next episode of Xaybeast Live to be about. Now, I'm really hoping more people join, because I don't want to immediately jump into this and have a lot of people miss everything. But I did say that this was going to be a lot less boring and more organized. So let's not get into the specifics right now. Let's just talk about horror films in general. So basically what we're going to be discussing is, like I said, we're starting with the 1920s all the way to present day and how horror has evolved. You know, the evolution of horror throughout history. Because there are many horror films that come out today that are very much like the horror films that came out back then. You know, the iconic horror films that I'm not going to name right now, because again, that is in the specifics of the video, and I don't want to necessarily get into all of that yet, but I think you can tell what I'm saying. However, many horror films today are extremely lacking in suspense and thrills and genuine care. Like, many horror films today, you just have no reason to care about anybody, and most of them are really bad. And unfortunately, some of the most successful films at the box office are films that just, I mean, it's all subjective, but most of the most successful horror films are just not good. Like, they're just bad. Like, Ouija Origin of Evil was good. First Ouija, no. The seemingly endless Paranormal Activity series, the first Paranormal Activity was great. It was fun, it was effective, it felt real. All the other ones, no. The Insidious series, we're going to be talking about the Insidious series. That is probably that series isn't bad. There isn't a movie in that series that I hate. I love the first one, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get really like deep diving into this stream. The other Insidious 2 I thought was good. Insidious 3 was enjoyable, and Insidious 4 was kind of not good, but it was enjoyable at times. That's probably the most consistent modern day horror franchise, right? Don't say Halloween, because we're not gonna talk very much about that 2018 Halloween film. But yeah, so I see 2 people are watching now. Like I said, I do have a lot to talk about. I do have a lot of notes right here, like a lot of notes. But I don't want to get into I don't want to get into the bones of the stream. That was a weird way to phrase it, but yeah, I'm gonna stand by that. I don't want to get into the bones of the stream until more people are watching. So let's just start this off with a little bit of a Q&A, I guess. Me asking you questions, you asking me questions. Let's just start a conversation. Keep in mind, you can comment. If you're watching on a TV, you cannot comment on your TV. But if you are watching on a TV, you can pull the stream up on your phone and just turn the volume down on your phone so there's not interruptions. And you can comment on the stream from your phone or your laptop and still watch it on the TV, and I will answer all comments. Now, with that said, I am going to make sure everyone knows that I'm live right now. So we're going to plug it in and get all the tools ready. So let's head over here, and I'm going to send out the mass notification that I'm currently live. So let's do that right now. We are going to do it right now. So we're going to delete that. Come on, delete. All right. So while I'm doing this, please leave any comments you want. Leave any comments that you want. All questions are welcome, but do keep in mind that the stream is about horror films, classic horror and present day horror. So let me send this notification out right now. Here we go. I apologize for the long silence, but I really want to make sure that everyone knows about this. I promise I will be talking, and we'll get to the fun part in a second. But you got to make sure that people are watching your stream, man, because it helps that stupid YouTube algorithm. It really, really does. All right, we are done. It has been sent, and hopefully everyone sees it. All right. Okay, there we go. So, dang it. Everything's falling apart here. Okay, so, back to some of the basic things. I hope this is a better quality stream than what I normally do. I mean, without the cool background and everything, it may not seem like it, but this is probably the stream that I am most prepared for, because I do have a lot to talk about, but I just sent that out, so, yeah, just leave your comments, do whatever you can, to start conversations and things like that. Again, and I'm sorry I keep on repeating myself, but keeping in mind that the stream is about classic and modern horror. Now, maybe we should just get into this, just to get into it, because I really don't want to waste your time. So we're gonna get into this. We're gonna be talking about horror films all the way back from the 1920s all the way to the present day. I have each decade listed here and the most popular or well-known horror films from each decade. Now that doesn't mean you guys specifically are going to know about these films, but among the film community and just throughout Hollywood history, these are the most iconic ones. There are going to be some titles that you recognize, movies that you know are classics, but maybe you just haven't seen. And yeah, so and some of these are in bold, and the ones that are in bold are the ones that are considered like milestones, you know, the horror films that really set the bar for all the horror films that were to be released after it. So we're going to get into that now. In the 1920s, not a lot of very well-known horror films except Nosferatu. Now, this was not the first horror film to come out, Nosferatu. I know it's kind of hard to say. Nosferatu. Nosferatu. Now, this is a vampire film, was released in 1922, and if you don't know, this is actually an unauthorized adaptation of a novel that was released in 1897 by Bram Stoker called Dracula. Everyone has heard of Dracula. You know that name. Not talking about Adam Sandler from Hotel Transylvania. We're not going to be talking about that. That is not a horror film. That is a comedy. Nosferatu, vampire film, came out in 1922, was unauthorized. They did not get the rights from Bram Stoker, the author of Dracula, to adapt that, so they changed a lot of the stuff to try to escape copyright issues. They changed the name of the vampire from Count Dracula to Count Orlok. They changed the name of some of the characters, but it is the exact same story, and I'm not going to get too deeply into it here. But just because, and there was a suing situation. The filmmakers of Nosferatu were sued, but the film was still allowed to be released because of test screenings and people and critics talking about just how terrifying the film was. Nosferatu has some of the most iconic, terrifying imagery, and I wish I could show some of it here, but my streams are not as advanced. I don't have as many abilities as many other YouTubers on the platform, so I do not have the ability to show images on the screen while I am live. If I was doing a separate video, then I could easily do that, but that's not what I'm doing. I'm live streaming and talking about these films. Now, I have seen Nosferatu, and it was actually surprisingly great, but I have also seen the actual Dracula film that was also based on Bram Stoker's Dracula novel that did have the copyright rights to be made. And it was good. Dracula was a good movie. It came out in the 30s, and we will talk about in a second when we get to the 30s segment. Or maybe we won't, because, yeah, never mind. It is listed here. Dracula was a good movie, but I do think Nosferatu is superior, which is weird, because Nosferatu technically wasn't even allowed to be made, but it was, and it was released because people were like, yeah, they didn't have permission to make this, but it's still really good. So, oh, that was a weird laugh. Yeah, I never want to do that again. Isn't Nosferatu a show now? I do believe that there is a show called Dracula, but it is separate from Nosferatu. It isn't adapted from the film Nosferatu itself. But there is a show called Dracula on Netflix, and I do really want to watch it because it actually looks very well made, and I am interested as to how they are adapting that story. But yeah, essentially Nosferatu, they didn't have permission to make it, but they did. They released it. It was so good, and now it's become like a classic, and it was the first film that was actually considered a horror film, because there were films released before that were considered horror-esque. But this was the first film to have that vibe, to have that publicity surrounding it of a scary time at the movies. It was the first film to really give off that aura and that persona surrounding it. So yeah, that's basically what it is. That jumping into the 1930s here, there are a lot of recognizable titles here. These are the classic Universal monsters that everyone knows and hopefully loves, because these are classics. Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, and Dracula. Now, The Invisible Man, talking about the original from the 1930s, which, not the new one from 2020, which we will talk about. I have it right here to talk about when we get to that. But I'm talking about the one from the 30s. But we also had Frankenstein, The Mummy, and Dracula. Now, Dracula, that was the film, that was the Dracula adaptation that actually had permission to be made, and was based off of Bram Stoker's Dracula novel, as I talked about before. The Mummy, a lot of people don't know this actually, but The Mummy was, the original Mummy film was released in the 30s, but nowadays more people know about the Brendan Fraser ones from the 90s and early 2000s. We're not going to talk about the second one. We're not going to be talking about that film. Oh, The Rock, what were you thinking? Jeez. All right, Frankenstein. Everyone knows about Frankenstein. I gotta be completely honest with you. I have seen all of these films, but there are some films in later decades that I just haven't seen. Some of that is due to my age, and then a lot of that is also due to the fact that I'm a contrarian. Like, it's just the way I am, you know? Like, if there's a thing that everyone is watching, everyone's like, oh my goodness, it's so great. I just won't watch it simply because, I mean, rule of contrast, I don't know why. However, there is something that I love to do every now and then, where there's a movie that is hailed as a classic and I haven't seen it and people tell me to see it, and then I don't watch it, but I go to those people and I say that I watched it and I hated it. And I've done that many, many times, and I've upset many, many people, but I do tell them that I actually didn't watch it. But yeah, Frankenstein, The Mummy, The Invisible Man, and Dracula. Now, here's the thing. Dracula was good, wasn't great. I do think Nosferatu was the better adaptation of the novel. Frankenstein, amazing practical effects. It pioneered practical effects, and so did Nosferatu. The Mummy, same thing. Honestly, the original Mummy isn't that great of a film. Yeah, it looks, I guess the effects look better than the 1991, because back in the 30s, they didn't have CGI. You know, they couldn't computer animate these mummies, so they had to use costumes. The 1990 film combined practical effects and CGI. I don't think they were combined extremely well, though, but that's just me. There are some good things in the 1990 film, which, by the way, I didn't list the 1990 Mummy film in the 1990s category on this live stream outline. I didn't list it there because it's not like one of the most memorable films from the 90s, and it's not a horror film, and the theme of this video is horror films. The Invisible Man pioneered visual effects. That was one of the first films to really exercise the blue screen formula. Nowadays, it's more green screen, but back then it was blue screen. Blue screen is still used nowadays, but it was more like back then in the 30s. Blue screen was more common. Sorry, I zoned out for a second. Yeah, the effects to make the Invisible Man invisible in the original was spectacular because he is wearing clothing throughout the film. And so and he has the bandages around his face when he takes that iconic scene where, because he's a mad scientist, that iconic scene where he's laughing and tearing away the bandages. Like, it's just great. That wasn't a great impression. Sorry, I keep on going blank. That wasn't a great impression of it, but you know what I mean. That maniacal laugh as he's taking off the bandages. It's freaking great, man. But when he takes them off, no head is visible, obviously, because he is invisible. But keep in mind that this was in the 30s, so it was hard to do that. Like, it was hard. It was very hard to do that. They had to, like, wrap a blue screen around his face. I can't imagine how uncomfortable that must have been. Honestly, I would love to make an Invisible Man movie. Like, just the stuff you can do. You know, like, just seeing objects floating around or move. Like, there's just a lot you can do. There's a lot you can do. Moving on to the 1940s. The 1940s really didn't have many, and they don't have a lot of well-known horror films from the 1940s, but there are two that I guess are semi-well-known, Cat People and The Wolf Man. The Wolf Man is probably more well-known. Cat People is less well-known, but it is well-known for one specific thing. Cat People was the first film ever, not just horror film, but the first film to have a jump scare. Believe it or not, Cat People was the first film to have a jump scare. Unfortunately, it is a false jump scare. The jump scare isn't from the actual threat in the film, but it's just a bus pulling into a station out of nowhere, and the sound is very loud, makes you jump. First jump scare. I don't know if that was the filmmaker's intent, but that is what it is, and that film is most well known for not only its use of practical effects, which it is well known for that, but the fact that it had the first jump scare of all time. All right, there's not really much to talk about. The Wolfman, cool practical effects. Not the best movie, honestly. All right, moving on to the 1950s. There are a lot here, so I need to make sure I don't misread any of them. Moving on to the 1950s, we have The Thing from Another World, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Blob, The Fly, Godzilla, and The Creature from the Black Lagoon. And Creature from the Black Lagoon is in bold because that set the milestone for many horror films. Now, you'll notice that a lot of the horror films that were released in the 50s were remade. In fact, all of these except Creature from the Black Lagoon were either remade, rebooted, or had a continuing franchise of sequels. The Thing from Another World was remade in the 80s, and we will definitely talk about that Invasion of the Body Snatchers was remade in the 70s. The Blob, I'm fairly certain the Blob was remade. I'm actually not sure about that one. The Fly was also remade, I believe, in the 80s. It had Jeff Goldblum. I gave it a cold. Yeah, that was a bad impression. Godzilla, obviously, tons of sequels, tons of remakes and reboots, and I like the 2014 Godzilla film. I know a lot of people were complaining there's not enough Godzilla, a terrible movie. Yeah, the Godzilla doesn't show up until like the final 20 or 30 minutes, but that's why it's so awesome when he does. That reveal when it pans up from his feet all the way to his face and he just lets out that incredible, just booming roar. That's why it's so awesome when it happens, because you don't see him for the majority of the film. So when you do, the payoff is magnificent. But I'm going off on a tangent here. We're going to get back to 1950s horror. And The Creature from the Black Lagoon has never been remade or rebooted, and for good reason, but it has been imitated by a lot of other movies that obviously just weren't good. All right, moving on to the 1960s, we have Psycho, which is in bold because Psycho was the most graphic horror film when it comes to violence and other things that were not, obviously, I'm not going to go into detail about. It was the most graphic horror film to have been released up until that point, and that's why when we get into the 70s, you're going to see that a lot of people just started making these bloody, just guts movies, because Psycho, when you rewatch Psycho today, it's honestly very tame. The violence isn't graphic at all, really. But it opened up the door. It gave filmmakers more freedom and more opportunity to make more graphic horror films. So we have Psycho, The Birds, another Hitchcock film, Rosemary's Baby, Night of the Living Dead, which was the first zombie film to ever be made, and The Village of the Damned, which was also remade, I believe, in the 90s. It might have been the 80s. We're not going to talk about the remake. I like the remake, but it's not very well known. All right, now moving in to the 1970s. There are a lot of titles here. The Exorcist, The Omen, Alien, Halloween, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake, Carrie, The Amityville Horror, The Hills Have Eyes, Suspiria, Black Christmas, When a Stranger Calls, and Jaws. Jaws. I mean, Jaws, Alien, Halloween, 1970s. The 1970s and the 80s arguably have the most horror films that are considered classics, you know? But yeah, The Exorcist. Come on, man. Alien pioneered practical effects. Halloween, extremely simple, gave birth to a lot of the horror tropes that we know today. And obviously Jaws. I mean, come on. It's Jaws. If you haven't seen Jaws, you're a terrible human being. And yeah. I have in parentheses here for the 70s, because there was a musical film that was released in the 70s. It's in parentheses, and I have a question mark right after the title, because I don't really consider it a horror film. I mean, I guess parts of it are horrific. I don't know exactly how I want to take that, but that film is the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I don't know if you consider that a horror film or not. There are aspects of it that I do consider horrific. I don't really know what genre you would put that film in. It's kind of every genre, isn't it? It's like kind of a horror, but it's also a musical, but it's also a romance, but there's some thriller aspects in there. There's some drama aspects in there. There's some sci-fi sort of aspects. It is a weird, all over the place movie, and I respect it for that. I really do. I really do. Into the 1980s, you have The Shining, The Thing, which is the remake of The Thing from Another World, The Evil Dead 2, Aliens, the sequel to Alien, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Hellraiser, Predator, The Fly, the remake of The Fly, Friday the 13th, the first one. We're not going to talk about the sequels. Continuing to move on here. Child's Play, Chucky, everyone knows that. The Gate. Not a lot of people talk about The Gate, but when you look back on 1980s horror films, it is one of the most notable. Pet Sematary, Cujo, Christine, and Gremlins. Pet Sematary also had a remake in 2019. I don't know if I listed it here, but I mean, I guess we'll find out when we get to that. All right, now there are 3 sections, and the first 2 sections are supposed to be 30 minutes each. So we have 5 minutes to read the rest of these films. So I'm not going to talk about in detail all these films. I'm just going to list them off. So that was the 1980s. 1990s, we have The Silence of the Lambs, Misery, Scream, I love Scream, The Blair Witch Project, Tremors, Candyman, It, Deep Blue Sea, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Anaconda, Arachnophobia, and the remake of Psycho. Now, this isn't supposed to be a list made only of great horror films, because there are some stinkers on there. There are some really bad horror films on there, but easily the worst one is the remake of Psycho. Why would you remake Psycho? There's no reason to remake Psycho. The whole point of remaking something is to improve upon it or add a new spin on it. But the remake of Psycho was literally a shot-for-shot remake, just to build off the success of Psycho. You can't fix perfection, so don't try. That's my little rant about that. Moving on to the early 2000s, this is when there were a lot of bad horror films, a lot of horror remakes and reboots, but there were also some gems in there. There were some good ones. Paranormal Activity, Final Destination, The Ring, The Others, Saw, American Psycho, 28 Days Later, Jeepers Creepers, Wreck, The Amityville Horror, The Grudge, 1408, What Lies Beneath, The Hills Have Eyes, the remake, The Descent, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the remake, and Halloween, the remake. We're not going to talk about Rob Zombie's Halloween. That is one of the most gratuitous films ever made. We're not going to be talking about that, but there are some gems in there. First Paranormal Activity, great. Final Destination, enjoyable. The Ring. I adore The Ring. I think The Ring is a masterpiece. I know a lot of people are kind of iffy on it. Like, a lot of people, they just view it as an enjoyable horror film. Effective. But I actually think that The Ring is a masterpiece that actually has an extremely emotionally powerful, not necessarily twist, but more of like a revelation towards the end. We'll put it that way. The Others, one of the best twists of all time. I'm not going to spoil it for you. The first Saw. Now, the Saw franchise has developed kind of a bad reputation. It's known as the torture stuff, you know? Just torture compilation. And honestly, but the first Saw is not like that. The first Saw is actually great. It was much more about the psychological aspect of it. And it wasn't focused on blood and guts. Now, yes, there are some bloody scenes, but there's never any guts, actually. There's never any gore. There's just scenes that have, well, there's obviously the scene that we all know, you know, the, when the guy has to, you know, saw his leg off. But that's actually very tame. You don't really see a lot of that. There's only one shot, really, where you see a ton of blood. And then there is one scene where a guy gets his head shot off, but you don't see the head. You just see blood run down his shirt because the shot stops about like right here. So you see the blood run down his shirt. Very tame, not focused on the violence, definitely much more focused on the psychological effects of that situation. All right. American Psycho. We're not going to go into detail on American Psycho. That will be a separate video. 28 Days Later, another zombie film. 28 Days Later really inspired the Walking Dead comic series, which was eventually turned in, obviously, to the extremely popular Walking Dead TV show that is somehow still going. It's moving on to the 11th season now, apparently. Let's see, where was I? Jeepers Creepers, a very underrated horror film. Oh, wait, no. Yes, Jeepers Creepers, very underrated horror film. Wreck, Wreck was a found footage zombie film. Very scary. Wreck is a very scary movie. It is a foreign film. It is a Spanish horror film. Just the sense of claustrophobia in that film. Like even just thinking about it, it gives me chills. The Amityville Horror remake. Not gonna talk about that. The Grudge, complete and total ripoff of The Ring. 1408, really underrated Stephen King film. What Lies Beneath, I haven't seen it, but I've heard it's great. It had Harrison Ford, I think. The Hills Have Eyes, a brutal, absolutely brutal remake of John Carpenter's original film, but not the worst movie. The Descent, one of my favorite horror films, The Descent. Again, just the thought of being trapped so deep underground in those cave systems with those humanoid creatures. Again, there are so many things in here that I'm just thinking about that are giving me chills. All right, we're gonna... the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that was another remake by Rob Zombie. Gratuitous, horrible. And then the Halloween remake, gratuitous, horrible. Rob Zombie, why did you ever... Why? Why did you ever make movies? Just stop. You're only focused on excess. Like, that's all you're focused on. You're focused on exploitation and gore. We're not... Jeez. All right, now we're getting into present day. This is from 2010 to 2020, so basically the past decade. This decade has the most titles of any other decade on this list, simply because horror films are crushing the box office right now, ever since 2010. So yeah, there are going to be a lot of titles in here, so I need to make sure that I don't get any of these wrong. Insidious, A Nightmare on Elm Street, the remake. The Cabin in the Woods, You're Next, Scream 4, Sinister, The Conjuring, Evil Dead, the remake, Carrie, the remake, It Follows, Annabelle, horrible, As Above, So Below, The Babadook, one of the scariest and most disturbing films that I've ever seen, honestly. Everyone should go watch The Babadook if you want a genuinely scary horror film. The Witch, Green Room, Don't Breathe, Lights Out, Hush. Hush is one of the scariest films that I've ever seen. It is on Netflix. Easily the best home invasion film I've ever seen. The Conjuring 2, The Belko Experiment, one of the most graphic horror films ever made. Get Out, It, the remake. Prometheus, the prequel to Alien. Alien Covenant, the prequel to Alien but sequel to Prometheus. Gerald's Game, another great Stephen King adaptation that is on Netflix. 1922, another incredible Stephen King adaptation that is also on Netflix. Hereditary, A Quiet Place. I love A Quiet Place. A Quiet Place Part 2 is coming out this year, or maybe it was delayed to 2021. I don't know, but I'm just so excited for A Quiet Place Part 2. Oh my goodness. The Nun, kind of a spinoff of the Conjuring universe. Not good. Halloween 2018, the film that attempted to reboot the Halloween series and succeeded in many aspects, but failed in a few aspects. Suspiria, the remake. Midsummer. Us. Us was made by Jordan Peele, who also did Get Out. Which, by the way, Get Out is one of the best films, not just horror films, but just one of the best films that I've ever seen. Honestly, that film was so cleverly written, so thrilling. Dr. Sleep, the long-awaited sequel to The Shining, made by the same guy who did Gerald's Game and Hush. It Chapter 2, we're not going to talk about that. The Lighthouse, wonderful film, The Lighthouse. Pet Sematary, the remake, which I actually really enjoy, and unpopular opinion, I think the remake of Pet Sematary is better than the original. I'm sorry, but that's just how I feel. I found it more disturbing, and it got under my skin more than the original. And that's what I want from a horror film. I want it to scare me, you know? Child's Play, the reboot/remake, whatever you want to call it. The Grudge Reboot, once again, pointless reboot, pointless ripoff of The Ring. And The Invisible Man 2020, one of the best horror reboots of all time. Because there's just so many crappy horror reboots, so to have one like The Invisible Man was really refreshing. So that was section 1 of the stream. I went about 5 minutes overtime, but that's okay. That means I have to be quicker with section 2, so maybe I'll hold your attention a little bit longer. There's only one person watching the stream right now, so that's that's kind of disappointing, but you get what you get, I guess. You get what you get. You get what you get. That's all I'm going to say about that. So let's move on to section 2. This is when the discussion gets a little bit more interesting. We have what makes a movie scary and how scares used to be versus how they are now. All right, let's get into this discussion. Now, there are 2 specific things that are used in horror films today that have been used since the beginning of horror films. And those 2 things are chilling imagery and implications. If you haven't watched my channel for a long time, you know that blood and gore doesn't really scare me. It's more so the bone-chilling imagery, looking out a window in the dead of night and seeing a silhouette standing in your front yard staring at you. That gives me goosebumps. Blood and gore, sometimes blood and gore, when it is done right, can be very scary, like in John Carpenter's The Thing, but most of the time, no. And unfortunately, a lot of modern horror films do rely on it. And also implications, chilling implications, things that aren't shown, but that are implied. Now, I haven't seen Seven, and Seven isn't really known as a horror film, that's more known as a thriller, but I haven't seen Seven. However, I am aware that that film has one of the most chilling, horrible, just downright awful implications of all time. We're not going to get into it. Also, modern mainstream horror over-relies on jump scares and gore. I talked about how it over-relies on gore to try and scare people. It's just not scary. Maybe it makes you a little bit squeamish, but it's not terrifying. And jump scares, oh my goodness. Now, like with gore, when it is done right, jump scares can be very effective. The Invisible Man and Insidious both have tons of jump scares, but they are not false. Now, what I mean by that is the jump scares are always the actual threat. The jump scares are Insidious. The jump scares in Insidious are always from the demon creature or any of the other things that are trying to hurt the kid. But and in the Invisible Man, the jump scares are always from the Invisible Man. Now, what is a false jump scare? Well, a false jump scare is when, someone puts their hand on someone's shoulder and the music just goes BUM! And it makes you jump, and it turns out to just be like a friend of the main character, not an actual threat. That was purely to make you jump. You're not scared of what... You're not actually scared. You didn't jump. Here, I have it written down here. Let's see here. Let's see here, because I'm going to elaborate and make sure I make my points very, very well. Yeah, those pointless jump scares, you're not jumping because you're scared, you're jumping because there was a really loud burst of music that startled you. You're not startled by what happened in the film, you're just startled by the burst of music. And that's just really lazy. It is the easiest way to get your audience to jump. Now, most horror classics have jump scares and gore, but it is tastefully done and therefore is chillingly effective. Like The Thing. Or, honestly, Halloween doesn't really have any blood in it, not to my knowledge. Nightmare on Elm Street. Blood and gore, but it is done tastefully and therefore is scary. Alien. There's blood and gore in that movie. That whole chest burster thing scared the crap out of me the first time I saw it. Alright. Now, another thing that can... simple premises. Simple storylines can make for an extremely effective horror film. Look at some of the most well-known horror classics, like Jaws, Halloween, Alien, The Thing. All of these films have extremely simple premises and are hailed as horror classics and are genuinely terrifying. So, it works. It goes both ways. Alright, now it is more difficult to execute a complex... Now, it's more difficult to execute a complex premise than a simple one. which is why many horror films with complex premises can often feel more confusing than scary. And you're not busy being like, the film isn't scaring you because you're just too dang confused about everything that's going on the screen, and that detracts from the overall experience of the film. The horror films that are the horror films that scare me the most are the ones that could actually happen. You know, the ones that make something that people often view as comforting and safe terrifying. For example, Nightmare on Elm Street. The idea that this guy can kill you in your dreams. Normally, sleep is something that's viewed as a very comfortable thing. You feel very safe in your bed at night because it's very relaxing. It's like, I'm going to get some sleep. I'm going to get rested. I'm going to wake up the next morning. Now, taking that away from you and making it to where if you go to sleep, you could very possibly die. This guy will kill you if he gets into your dream. That is terrifying. Now, I do want to briefly talk about this, and believe me, do not leave right now. Like, if you're thinking about leaving, at least stay for this. There is a true story that inspired the first Nightmare on Elm Street film, and this is going to give you chills. It gives me chills. In my opinion, this is more chilling than the movie itself. Now, there's a true story of a boy who was complaining about night terrors that he was having. He was complaining about it. I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about it. He was complaining to his family that he was having night terrors, and they thought that it was just bad dreams. They told him, it'll be fine. Just go to sleep. Just rest up. It's fine. They're just dreams. Now this boy just thinking about it. Now this boy continuously complaining about these horrible night terrors that he was having. And one morning, they found him dead in his bed. There was a coffee maker on his nightstand, and he had been drinking coffee because of the caffeine to try to keep himself awake. And then one morning, he was found dead in his bed. He died in his sleep, and still, to this day, it has not been determined how he died. They were never able to determine how he died. He just was found dead in his bed one morning. No wounds, no internal damage. He was just dead. And they still haven't figured out how he died. And he was complaining about all these night terrors that he was having and that they were hurting him and everything. And then one morning, he was found dead. And that is just chilling to me. Like, just, that makes me afraid to sleep. I watch Nightmare on Elm Street, and I can still go to sleep after watching that film. But that true story? No. Like, every time I hear that, I don't want to go to sleep, because I'm just like, what was that? They still haven't determined how he died. Like, that's just terrifying. That is absolutely they should make a movie about that. Make a movie about that true story, and make it about the paranoia and trying to figure out what this was. That would be chilling. That chills me. Now, back to simple premises. Modern horror films with simple premises, such as The Descent, Hush, A Quiet Place, The Lighthouse, those films all work in spades because of the simple premise. The Descent, a group of girls gets trapped deep underground while spelunking, and there's some creatures. There you go, instant 2-hour thrill ride. Hush, a psychopathic killer traps a woman inside her house, and she has to survive the night. There you go, instant 2-hour thrill ride. A Quiet Place, creatures that rely on sound. You have to remain completely quiet. If you make a sound, they will hunt you down and kill you. Great, 2-hour thrill ride right there. The Lighthouse, 2 lighthouse keepers alone on an island slowly going insane. There you go, instant 2-hour thrill ride. Now, there are more modern day horror films that have very simple premises that I could mention, but those are the main ones that I wanted to mention. I'm being very expressive right now because I find it just keeps people's attention when I'm all like, this is this, and we're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about this and that, Yeah. So, moving on. It is more, I already talked about that, how it's more difficult to execute a complex premise. Most horror films today are nowhere near as good or effective as older ones, but every now and then there is one that comes along that is, and those are generally more well-received because they are actually scary. Now, how much money a film makes doesn't necessarily tell you how much people enjoyed it. Like, for example, Annabelle. It was a spinoff of the Conjuring films, and The Conjuring was a great horror film. So when people heard that there was going to be a spinoff and it was called Annabelle and it was about the doll from those films, people got really excited. Opening weekend, a ton of people pay to go see it, and therefore the movie makes a lot of money. But that money is coming from how many people paid to see it in anticipation. It doesn't determine whether or not people actually liked the movie. So that's why those don't focus on the box office too much, because that doesn't actually tell you whether or not audiences enjoyed the film. Annabelle was an extremely successful film financially, but critically, no, it wasn't at all. I mean, seriously, look at critic reviews for it. Hardly anyone liked that film, but it made a ton of money because it was a spin-off to a very good horror film. There you go. A lot of the horror films that are making a lot of money are films that are not good, but made a lot of money because they were related to something else that was good, or the trailer looked great, or something like that. But the modern day horror films that are the most successful, both financially and critically, are the ones that rely on older techniques, chilling imagery, well done jump scares, and dark implications. For example, The Invisible Man worked like wonderfully. This film was terrifying because it enlisted the Blumhouse formula. It reduced to a very low budget of $9 million and got a very seasoned horror director, Lee Winnell, and a very, very likable actress, Elizabeth Moss. Her name almost escaped me for a second. And wonderful. Low-budget horror films are generally much better than the big-budget horror films that we keep on getting, like Annabelle or Ouija. And, all the Paranormal Activity sequels and everything like that. And it works because it relied on chilling imagery and sound design. It actually made you care about the main character, who is smart. Oh my, that's another thing. How did I forget to talk about that? So many people in horror films nowadays are so stupid. And it's not scary when they die. It's fulfilling when they die because they're so dumb and you want them to die. You're like, please, just go die. Just die. I hate you. You're so dumb. You deserve to die and be banished to the bowels of hell. I mean, maybe not everyone feels that way, but I do. That was very morbid, and I apologize for that. But I'm losing my voice, by the way. When I'm yelling, I'm like, ah! I don't know. It's weird. It's weird. It's weird like that. But, yeah. So that, section 2, a lot shorter than I previously anticipated. Again, only one person is watching right now. I would have liked a lot more people so that we could have this discussion. But that one person who is watching, please, let's have this discussion. What makes a movie scary to you? What movies scare you the most? Please comment and let me know about that. And now with section 3, the Q&A, where you guys ask me a bunch of questions, and I give you updates, and then I ask you guys what subject you would like the next episode of Xaybeast Live to be about. I see another person just joined. If you just joined, basically what I'm saying is I just asked you guys, what horror films scare you the most? What gets under your skin? For me, a lot of times, while I do love a lot of supernatural horror films, I mean, hello, I love Insidious. While I do love a lot of things like that, the horror films that often scare me the most are the ones that could actually happen. Like Hush. That could actually happen. Oh, hey, Mr. Movie, what's up, man? Haven't talked in a while. In my opinion, a movie needs to be a really eerie film, like the Blair Witch Project. Signs is also pretty solid. Great example. I love the Blair Witch Project. A lot of people think it's an effective horror film, but and a lot of people don't view the Blair Witch Project as a classic, but I do. I thought the way that it was helmed and the decision to make it found footage and the lead performances, all great. And the fact that you never actually see the witch makes it all the more terrifying. Signs by M. Night Shyamalan, right before he kind of went downhill. Signs was great. The CGI aliens towards the end doesn't always work, but it didn't take me out of the movie, I'll say that. Signs was great. It definitely went the show don't tell route, but it also went the route of Jaws, of not showing the threat, and then by the time you do see it, it becomes all the more thrilling. And the finale of Signs, James Newton Howard's score for Signs it's masterful. 10 Cloverfield Lane is also a fantastic horror film, just not a monster film like people wanted. Yes. Now, with that in mind, I actually love the first Cloverfield film, but I also love 10 Cloverfield Lane, and that confuses a lot of people. They're like, what? How can you like 10 Cloverfield Lane if you like the first Cloverfield? 10 Cloverfield Lane is hardly even related to the Cloverfield, to Cloverfield, aside from one line. 10 Cloverfield Lane, in my opinion, is the best film in the Cloverfield anthology. I didn't really like the Cloverfield paradox. It was very exposition-y, not very thrilling in my opinion. But 10 Cloverfield Lane, I think, is the most tense film in the anthology. I think it has the best performances of the anthology. Well, yeah, okay, it has fantastic performances, but the performances in the first Cloverfield film were also very good and made you believe what was happening. It made you believe that those people were actually scared. But I do think the performances in 10 Cloverfield Lane are the best. 10 Cloverfield Lane focused on claustrophobia and really building that tension of John Goodman's character, Howard. Is this guy crazy or is he telling the truth? What is going on here? Once again, a very psychologically disturbing horror film. And yeah, I mean, it was great. And I need to buy that Blu-ray. There's so many Blu-rays that I really need to get. It's kind of hard right now, because with the coronavirus, I'm ordering a lot of things online. But since I'm about to be moving out of state to a completely different location, I don't want to order something and then have it delivered here, but me already be gone. So I'm just going to wait to buy a lot of those new I am saving up. I have a lot of money saved up to buy a lot of these Blu-rays, but I have to wait to order those until I move to my new home. The Sixth Sense is one of the best too. Yes, another M. Night Shyamalan film when he was in his prime. The Sixth Sense brilliantly combines horror with drama. Like, The Sixth Sense was nominated for like 6 Academy Awards. Ironically, the sixth nomination. But yeah, perfectly blended horror and drama, which ties into what I was saying before. One of the biggest things that has to be in a horror film for it to work is care. You have to care about the characters, because some of the scariest horror films, like the Invisible Man, the new Invisible Man film, and Insidious, and even some classics like Jaws or Halloween. Well, don't really care much about the characters in Halloween, but it's still effective because of the imagery. But Jaws, Insidious, The Invisible Man, the reason so many of these films are so scary is because when scary stuff is happening, you're scared for the characters because you care about them. That's what makes it scary. Like, when you watch Jaws, you're not thinking, oh, look at that shark, that's so awesome and bloody. Like, yeah, it's cool. The shark looks cool and awesome, but you're more thinking about when those characters are in those situations. You're thinking more so, watch out, like you're scared for that character, and that's why you're scared, because you're in their shoes. You're like, watch out, Chief Brody, like, don't die, please don't die, Chief Brody. Like, you're scared for the characters. Matt Hooper, Quint. Speaking of which, I'm gonna talk spoilers just here for a minute for Jaws. If you haven't seen Jaws, like I said, you're just a horrible human being, like, why do you live? Why? There's no point to living. Anyway, yeah, Quint's death in Jaws, pretty graphic, actually, rewatching it. Again, people mix up blood and gore so much. A ton of blood and blood spatter is not gore. Gore is like guts and, things like that. Pretty graphic, actually. But like I said, Psycho in the 1960s gave filmmakers a lot more freedom to do more graphic content, even though Psycho really wasn't that graphic. It did show there was a good bit of blood. The violence in Psycho is tame now, But back in the 60s, that was like one of the most graphic films that had ever been made. So yeah, that's basically, I cannot count how many times I have seen Jaws. Yeah, Jaws is one of the most rewatchable films. A lot of older films, they don't really hold up. Jaws is one of the ones that do. And by the way, they just released Jaws on 4K. And I mean, the Blu-ray transfer was pristine. It was brilliant. I really, really need to buy Jaws on 4K. That will definitely be one of my Blu-ray purchases. Definitely. All right, let me retrace. Where was I? We were talking about... Awesome. I think we were just talking about just horror films in general, because like I said, this is section 3. It's the Q&A, where you guys tell me what makes a film scary for you. And yeah, we were talking about what makes a film scary to you, as well as just a Q&A segment. Doesn't necessarily have to be about horror films. You guys can just ask me anything, because I know you guys like to know stuff, and I like answering y'all's questions. A few updates I'm going to be giving. Not really many updates, but you know, there's some. And asking you guys what you guys want the next episode of Xaybeast Live to be about. All right. Talking about what makes a horror film scary. Yes. Yeah, that's what yes, Split was terrifying. Speaking of Split, that's competition. Really the only... Okay, I'm not going to spoil Split, but if you don't know the big twist of Split yet, then you must have been living under a rock or something. Why do you watch movies? But yeah, the twist in Split, the only competition that it has is The Sixth Sense when it comes to my personal favorite and most shocking M. Night Shyamalan twist of all time. And I was just... like, it blew my mind. It blew my mind. I love Split. I'm going to have to do a video on Unbreakable and Split, because I already did one on another movie that I'm not going to say the title of, because I don't want to spoil Split for anyone who doesn't know the twist. Sorry, man, I have to go. Yeah, that's fine, man. Have a good day. Thanks for watching for the short time you were here. But now I'm going to ask you guys, what do you want the next episode of Xaybeast Live to be about? Because we are nearing the end of the stream. So yeah, just comment and let me know what you'd want the next episode to be about. This one was about classic and modern horror. I've done episodes on survival films. I did an episode on... Yeah. I did episodes on survival films and classic and modern horror, which was this one. So yeah, comment below and let me know what you want the next stream to be about. So yeah, I'm going to sit and patiently wait for you guys to comment and tell me those preferences, because I think that's a good way to get more people to actually watch these streams and stay for longer. Like, if the stream is about something that they actually want to talk about, because up until now I've decided the topics that I want to talk about, and I think if the audience decides what to talk about, maybe it'll be a little bit more investing or, you know, intriguing or something like that. More opportunities for conversation. But yeah, we have about 2 minutes left, so I guess I can, I don't really have many updates. I guess I can tell you videos that I'm working on. I am working on videos for both of these films, The Invisible Man 2020 and Insidious. Working on videos for both of those films. I'm also working on a video for 127 hours. I am almost done with season 2 of Lost. When I finish that, I will upload my review for that. That's really all the stuff I have planned now. However, and this is a big update. I've already told you that I'm moving, but this is the big one that everyone absolutely needs to know. Please share this stream after it uploads, because all of my subscribers need to know about this. Because of the fact that I'm moving, I am going to take a little bit of a hiatus from YouTube. Not going to be very long, like maybe a week or two, maybe 2 or 3 weeks. But I'm still going to be working and writing videos in that time period. So it's not like I'm quitting or anything. Don't get blown out of proportions. It's just there will be about a week to maybe 3 weeks of very little content on my channel because of the move. But when I have my room set up at the new house, I am going to be pumping those videos out to you guys like lightning. Like it is going to be a hailstorm of all that stuff. But that is going to wrap up this episode of Xaybeast Live. Thanks so much for watching, guys. It really does mean a lot. I'll see you in the next video. And until then, keep writing, keep shooting, and keep editing.